Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge. I am Jon Najarian, my brother Pete Najarian joining me in just a second. We've got some great numbers out of Tesla, but were the IBM numbers good enough to lift that stock and the tech stocks? Well, we'll see. Join us for the Rebel's Edge. Bang! Gee,
there it is.
I wonder what
there
that
it is.
Because it's not an option to miss the Rebel's Edge. Pete and I were shooting, I think I counted either 28 commercials yesterday, Pete, between the 15-second version, the 30-second versions, the ones for just Facebook and YouTube and so forth. I mean, went for hours and hours. It is so much. I mean, they're great. The people that did it and work with us are great, but so much nicer to just be here with Pete trading and focused on that rather than reading scripts off of prompters, which is something Pete and I never really do, except for those commercials.
And people, John, they come up to you all the time. They're like, "Oh, what did the prompter say?" And it's like, no. When we're on air, we are not looking at a prompter. It is whatever somebody's question is, going directly at that, and it's a different world. So the prompter is definitely something that we're not as accustomed. Although yesterday, probably our most smooth one that we've ever done as far as those commercials go.
Yeah. Well, I hate to say it, but we're probably getting good at reading those prompters.
That's not good.
Well, let's dive into Macro Minute, Pete.
Yep.
Macro Minute. Mark dug this one up, and I think it's a pretty good one to start us off with today. Macro Minute, I'm going to say, is hedge funds have closed out more than $10 billion of short positions. Now, why would they close short positions? Perhaps because they think we're going up. Now, their timing wasn't so great because the market right now at mid-session, Pete, the Dow's down 300 points. Now, the NASDAQ's higher, but the Dow's down 300, and we'll have some reasons for that in just a minute. What do you have for macro, Pete?
Yeah, I'm going to hit this, John. I mean, the macro side of it is absolutely, we've got earnings. We know that. I mean, that's been something that has been very market moving for sure and reactive like it always has been and always should be. But let's combine that with the 10-year that we talked about yesterday with Liz Claman on Fox Business. We were talking about how that's disrupting the markets from a 3.6 to a 4.2 plus. That's an amazing run to the upside. Now, today it's giving a little bit back, but not a whole lot, John. That's something that I think from the macro perspective, that's what's weighing on the markets just as much as the earnings itself.
Yep, you are so right, Pete. And we're right back to Fantastic Futures. And as we enter Fantastic Futures, we got to give our sponsor of Fantastic Futures a little plug here.
Yeah.
So this is a paid endorsement, folks. Of Hard Assets, plural, Alliance. That's Hard Assets Alliance. These guys, it is truly one of the best ways to own gold and silver, to invest in those two precious metals. The reason is they have 10 different dealers bidding and offering so that it's not just a one-way street like it is when if you've ever owned gold coins or a gold bar, silver bar for that matter, and tried to go into a place where they'll give you a bid for that, you'll find that you lose a pretty significant percentage from the spot price of gold or silver, whether you're buying or selling. If you're buying, you're buying higher. If you're selling, you're selling lower. Now, I'm not going to say that the same doesn't exist over at Hard Assets Alliance, but when you've got 10 different dealers competing, you're going to get a higher bid and a lower offer. That's the way markets work, folks. So again, if you want to invest in gold and silver the way Pete and I do, the way Mark Lopresti does, well, one of the great ways is Hard Assets Alliance. If you scan that QR code, you can go right to their website. You can see that, hey, if you want to take delivery, they're more than happy to ship it to you. If you'd rather just put it in a Brinks secure facility anywhere around the world where Brinks is, well, that's an option too. So that's why we decided that of all the different gold and silver dealers Pete and I could deal with, Hard Assets Alliance was probably a pretty good spot to go. So make sure you check them out, hardassets.alliance.com. All right, Pete. Well, since they do sell gold, I will mention that gold's up another $17 today. It's like if it's a day that ends in day, gold and silver are up. That's just the way it's worked this year, Pete. I mean, the numbers are staggering. So that's my fantastic future again today. How about you?
It absolutely is staggering, John. I mean, it's absolutely incredible to see what gold and silver both have done over the last week even, or, as you said, almost every single day is another record high. But I'm looking at the volatility index and how tight it really is right now, John. Now, we've been in the 18s, we've been in the 19s. Yesterday, we got up over 20 for about 10 seconds or so, but it just shows you that it's just that tight right now, and that's a great reflection of exactly what we're looking at right now. When we look at the S&P 500, yesterday, the movement, well, let's call it about a 1% plus move. Seems to make sense where we are right now. I would say keep an eye on that. It's been a great tell for the markets, and it's going to continue to be a great tell because that's what this is. It gives you the opportunity to see where the nerves might be, but also what is actually happening within the market, within the S&P 500 and how that's moving. So keep an eye on that. And right now it is extremely tight. Like I said, 18 to 19.
Well, and when Pete and I talk about precious metals, like the Hard Assets Alliance guys, I'll just let you know, folks, that if you had some silver in your portfolio, it's up 41%. That's right, 41% year to date.
Not bad.
You have a hard time finding a lot of stocks that would match that. Yeah, maybe NVIDIA and a couple others, but I'm telling you, for assets that are going higher rather than lower, silver and gold outperforming again. All right, speaking of outperforming, Pete, Tesla, you and I, as you said, we were on Liz Clayman's show yesterday. She asked me about Tesla and what do I think here? And I said, well, Liz, if indeed they're expected to deliver over 450,000 cars, which they announced yesterday, I said, you look at who their competitors are in the U.S. and whether it's Lucid, whether it's Rivian, we're talking about literally thousands of cars versus hundreds of thousands of cars. And I said, that's why they get the visibility that they get. And it's deserved, Pete, because the earnings per share, 72 cents for the quarter. Expectations were for 60 cents. And I think Mr. Musk, despite the fact that people hate him for backing President Trump, they can't hate him for what he does with those electric vehicles, Pete.
Well, John, he's figured out how to deliver. And you and I talk about this all the time. And there's so many people who miss the mark when they're talking about Tesla because, yes, we all know they make EVs, right? But it's also, this is a data-driven company that absolutely is a tech stock within all of this. So when you look at it, there's a big reason why Tesla is traded the way it's traded versus any competition anywhere when it comes to the EV markets. And they absolutely crushed it. You just mentioned it. They crushed it on the earnings. They also crushed it on, how about the gross margins, John? That was up almost 20%. So that's a pretty big number. They were looking for 16.8. They get 20%. Not so bad. I'd say that just about every way that you could look at this thing, deliveries, 462,000. Yeah, 462,000. You and I have heard a lot of these EVs that come out there. Well, we got 40,000 out there. That's just great. But you look at what's going on with Tesla and a big move to the upside, a monstrous 17% move to the upside. And the volume is outrageous in the stock itself, John. Just crazy. And we might have had some unusual here, I think.
Yeah, I think we did, Pete. Take a look at this one, folks. Tesla had 40,000. That's 4 million share equivalent. Every option's for 100 shares. In case you're a first-time viewer and you're not so certain about what options are, every option gives you the right to buy 100 shares of stock. Every option that you own, every call option. They bought 40,000 of them in September. That's 4 million share equivalent of a $214 stock. At least that's where it was back then.
Yeah.
Now the stock explodes higher today, up 13, 14%. Volumes are tremendous. And another big winner for the heat seeker, Pete. So folks, if you want to get some trades like that, come on over to marketrebellion.com/get started for trades exactly like that. All right, Pete, let's dive into UPS, because United Parcel Service, they came out with their earnings. They were better than expected. They raised full year operating profit margin, and shares were up 7 or 8% in the pre-market. My question to you is, did they hold on to that, and or would you buy it here?
I absolutely look at it, John, and I marvel at what they're doing and how they're doing it. And it's absolutely incredible. I mean, they have absolutely dominated in the space. A lot of that is because of where they actually hang their hat, which is domestic and ground, as opposed to the competition with FedEx, who's out there globally. And it's absolutely, I look at this stock and I think, you know what? Despite the fact that it's had this really nice move, they had a nice earnings that you just talked about, John. I think this thing's got a lot more room to the upside. Everywhere I look, I had a hard time finding anything that wasn't great. Here's the most impressive number, though. Operating profits were up 48% versus a year ago. Now, this is an old company. This isn't some tech company that just came out 2 years ago and we're all excited because it's ripping to the upside. This is UPS, and they have those kind of numbers. When you put up numbers like that and you beat on, your earnings and even if you're even in line or you beat on the revenue, this is a company that's absolutely clicking right now. They're doing what's right. They're absolutely doing it the right way. And I think this is a stock that has plenty of room still to the upside. You look right now, John, the PE is a 14. The forward PE is a 14. That's extremely low for just about anything. So I think if that thing got up there towards 16 or 18, that means this stock would have a pretty daggone big run to the upside before it got to those levels.
Yeah, and we're talking about a company that does like $22.2 billion in rev, folks. So massive, massive numbers out of UPS. And even with Prime, that's the Amazon company, of course, even with the Prime Airlines and delivery trucks out there, UPS still makes a lot of the deliveries for things that we buy almost every day. All right, let's talk about IBM, Pete. IBM shares, they came out with numbers and reduced enterprise spending on non-gen AI projects. What does that mean? That means they're doing well on the AI projects, but if it's not artificial intelligence, they're not doing so well. And in fact, the cloud software side, which used to be a pretty significant driver, might be softening up a little, Pete.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, it's interesting when you look at this IBM thing, John. They missed on the revenue, as mentioned. They beat on the earnings. That's great. But they actually numbers, I thought, that were pretty decent. Yes, the AI side of it maybe is a little bit different, but the software was up 9.5%. The Red Hat part of the business up about 14%. There's progress going on with AI. I look at this company and the fact that they're selling it off. This might be one to really keep a very close eye on for a turn. I look at them and I think to myself, they're down 6 or 7%. Okay, I get it. They just came off 52-week highs. So they're pulling back, and I think this is just a potential correction where now, at some point in the very near future, if we see some unusual, I'm really excited about this one, John, to look for a big move to the upside. I'm not going to go until I see that, but I'll tell you what, this is a stock that I think that they're moving really, really well, and I know that they've stumbled a little bit here, and the revenue is sort of the disappointment. I think this thing, when it trades at EE where it is, this has plenty of room still to the upside as well.
Well, I happen to like it. So Pete and I are both thinking that IBM on weakness, which we're seeing, could be a pretty interesting play for those of you who actually trade options. Instead of just saying, well, I'd like to buy it if it were $8 lower. Well, you could sell a put that's $5 out of the money and perhaps collect $3 for that put. What would that mean? That means if it drops $5, you're owning it $8 lower than where it was at the moment you made that call. So interesting ways to trade if indeed you have a commitment to that stock. All right, Pete, let's finish up with two airlines, perhaps going in the same direction or opposite direction. American Airlines, better than expected quarterly profit and revenue. Southwest Airlines, They say that their revenue was also up, but the profit fell by 2/3 on higher costs. And you and I know that's not higher costs of fuel alone, Pete. It's probably some of the contracts they've had to sign with people, human beings that work for the company.
Yeah, and then you've got Elliott Management. That's a big deal, and they've been pushing. And by the way, speaking of pushing, Gary Kelly's been a guy that we've met many times in the past. He's been the CEO. He's done a great job to some degree, not always, of course. I mean, there's some issues that they've had along the way as well. But you know what, John? I think they're going to push him out the door because from what I just read, it looks like November 1st is his final day at Southwest. And oh, by the way, because of what they're doing with this settlement that they're working on and everything else, Elliott will have 6 members of the board seats. So that of 13. That's pretty interesting as well. Elliott's really put themselves into a very strong position for them to maybe influence this company. Now, we'll see how well they can do that, John. They've done a lot of great work in the past. We'll have to see if they're able to do it now because Southwest has slipped. A lot of people are talking about it. And obviously, they're saying, you know what? It maybe starts right at the top with the CEO. Yeah,
well, Mr. Kelly's done a great job helping build that company, Pete. And now the question is whether or not Starboard or, any of these activist investors know as much as they think they know about running the sorts of companies that they can now flex their muscle and come in and own big pieces of. Yeah. So we'll keep an eye on that one, Pete.
Yeah.
All right. How about some sports? Let's start it off with the NFL, Pete. What do you got?
Let's kick it off. It's almost mid-season. It's very close to the middle of the season. We played either 6 or 7 games, and now obviously the Vikings are playing the Rams tonight. That's all great. Here's what I wanted to focus on today. Who's in trouble right now? And I'll give you a couple of them, John. The Cowboys and the 49ers are both in trouble. The Cowboys are 3-3. The Niners are 3-4 right now. This is the team, the Niners, that everybody, including myself, said at the beginning of the year, this is a team that's going to be in the Super Bowl, likely against Baltimore. That would be my choices. What I didn't see coming was Ayuk out. Receivers, go through the entire receiving core over there with the 49ers, and people are pointing the finger at Brock Purdy going, hey, he doesn't look that good. Well, he probably doesn't look good because just about every wide receiver on the team is on the IR, or maybe they're going to be able to come back. He hasn't had Christian McCaffrey the entire season. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why the 49ers are struggling. They're playing each other, the Cowboys and 49ers. If the Niners lose that game, John, they're going to have 5 losses, and I think it's going to be a really difficult hill to climb under those circumstances for them to be able to get back into the playoff picture. There's just too many good teams out there in other divisions. So it's going to make it tough. I think when you look at the AFC, I got a matchup where you can see a similar type thing playing out. The Eagles, they're fine right now. They don't look great, but they're fine right now. They figured out something that wasn't that hard to figure out. They've got a running back by the name of Barkley that all you got to do is give him the ball. They didn't give him the ball. Finally started to give him the ball. Wow, they got 4 wins so far. So I don't think that they're in as much trouble as they started out when they didn't look very good early. But Cincinnati, holy smokes. The Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Burrow is having an absolute awesome year. But who's not having an awesome year is the defense of the Cincinnati Bengals. It's a real problem. They are so bad on defense, John, that he's got to outscore what they're giving up or they're not going to get there. Well, they're 3-4. They lose this week and they turn into a 3-5 football team. They're looking up at Pittsburgh, way up top, Baltimore, even higher up top. They're out of it. I mean, I don't know that they can recover from that if they lose this next game. So I just thought it would be interesting to see that it's amazing how fast the NFL develops, but the Niners got to win. This is a must win. And I'll tell you what, must win this week for Cincinnati as well.
Well, don't disagree. I'll point out, Pete, that something that is not very typical of Harbaugh, and I don't mean Jim Harbaugh for a change. I mean John Harbaugh.
Wow.
John Harbaugh has always been a hard-nosed, great coach. Yep. He's got a Super Bowl ring, I believe, Pete, because of that. And he's been in some, in the running virtually every year that he's been the head coach there. But what have they made their bones on? Defense. Mm-hmm. Do they have a great offense? The answer is yes. especially with, as you said, as soon as it happened, when King James came aboard, they started really doing some amazing things, Pete.
Yeah.
And he's the real king, by the way. But I will point out that they let 41 points go up on the board this past weekend. That is not, and granted, it's Baker Mayfield. It's a good, very good Tampa Bay team, but that was without Evans, Pete. I mean, Evans is out for I don't know how long, but Baltimore, I'm sorry, I said 31 points. They put up 41, but they let Baker Mayfield and the Bucks put up 31. That's not typical Baltimore football, Pete.
Yeah.
So I think this weekend they've got a great cure, though, because they're going to be playing the Cleveland Browns. They might shut them out.
That's the cure that every team wants, is to have a shot with the Cleveland Browns.
Yes.
And Watson, God knows what'll happen. I mean, obviously he's got the injury, so now he's out, but it wouldn't have mattered anyway. I mean, they weren't any better. Matter of fact, they might have been worse with him out there on the field than almost anybody else. All right, let's jump. And by the way, you meant King Henry. You actually said King James. It was King Henry that we're talking about here with Baltimore, just in case anybody's confused about that whole thing. All right,
That's
John.
right.
Now, we talked about parity in college football, and I think it's really something that is pretty special. And this is something that makes it even more interesting. Alabama, they are a team that if you polled every sports writer in all of America and they said, all right, of all the schools out there that we had in the playoff, which one team will absolutely be there? I would say people might say Georgia first, but then second, they're going to say Alabama. They just are going to do it. John, Alabama's a 5-2 football team. They're going to be playing Missouri. Missouri is a 6-1 football team. This could get pretty interesting because why did Bama lose last week to Tennessee? Tennessee could run the football. Tennessee has a running back this year who's absolutely outrageously good. He doesn't get talked about hardly at all. His name is Sampson. He's got the hair and everything. But they are absolutely, they run the ball. They throw the ball a little bit. Heupel still likes to throw the ball, but they run the ball. They ran the ball right up the backside of Alabama this past week. Well, Missouri comes in. They've got a running back named Nate Knoll, John. He's averaging 6 yards a carry, and the kid's an absolute beast. They got another one, Marcus Carroll, is averaging 5 yards a carry, and they just in and out, and they both get to share the whole, the rock a little bit. I'll tell you what, Alabama, if they can't stop these two guys, they got a real problem, because if they drop to 5-3, they are not going to be in the college playoff. I don't think anybody's going to go undefeated this year. I really don't. But you're not going to get in with 3 losses, and Bama's kind of teetering on that. So they better watch out this week against Missouri, John. You and I have talked about them before. They've got Brady Cook at quarterback. He's done a very nice job, although his touchdowns aren't very big this year. They're making it on a team that's running the football first and a good defense. And they're still sitting in the SEC just like last year, John, where they finished, I think, 10-2. And they're sitting there right now at 6-1. Not so bad.
Not so bad. Well, I'll tell you somebody else who's not so bad, Pete, the Indiana defense.
Yeah.
And I know that this one had to sting a little bit for Pete, folks, because he likes to, along with Warren Buffett, he likes to root for Nebraska. That's not his main team. It's Minnesota, the Gophers. But you do like Nebraska, Pete. Yep. They got thumped like 56-7 by Indiana, another red and white team. So you had Big Red against Big Red and White. And, man, that was a tough one. I think that Indiana team is for real, Pete.
Yep.
Now, the difference is, folks, then Pete and I could talk about this a lot. You usually don't see a team like Alabama fade like they're fading because they've got the depth. Maybe that's one of the issues of the portal, because the kids that would have been stuck there and been forced into playing now halfway through the season, the kids are delighted to be playing at that point, but the depth is just not the same as it was before the portal existed. So what I'd say, Pete, is that used to be a big separator between teams like Indiana and teams like Georgia and Bama, because they just reload.
Yep.
They don't rebuild, they reload. Now they might be on a par with those teams because those teams don't have that same depth that they used to have when they'd have 3 offensive tackles that could have started on any team in America, 3 or 5 offensive guards, 4 linebackers, and blah, blah, blah. In other words, they had a lot of extra folks. Now they probably have the 2 starters on middle linebacker or outside linebacker or whatever, and then really good kids behind them, but not the same level. They're not the 4-star recruits, because those 4-star recruits that weren't playing transferred, and they went to schools like Indiana or schools like Minnesota. Because a lot of your Gophers, you told me this, Pete, a lot of the Gopher kids that were growing up in Minnesota that went to LSU, that went to Nebraska, have transferred back because they were backing up somebody at those schools. And they said, you know what? I'd rather play in front of my friends and family and start.
Yep. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you're exactly right, John. I mean, Minnesota used that as the blueprint. They brought back a kid who went to LSU. They brought back a kid who went to Clemson. They brought back a kid who went to Ohio State. All of these guys. We finally landed one this past year, by the way, and all he's done is been the defensive player of the week twice now, and he's a freshman from Esco. I know everybody knows Esco, Minnesota. I mean, it's on every map. I mean, everywhere. But this kid is special. Coy Parrish is his name, John, and he's unbelievable. He's stopped the previous couple of games. He's got an interception to close out the game to win the football game, and he's played extremely well during the game. Punt return, kick return, you name it, the kid can do it all. He's a safety. He's a heck of a player, but I think you're right. The depth is what's changed. Indiana's got a problem, sort of, I think. I think they've got game day, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure it's game day this week at Indiana. The problem is the quarterback's got an injury with his thumb, which is not a good injury for a quarterback, obviously. So I don't know how they're going to be able to manage, how well they're going to be able to manage. They're really well coached, but to lose your quarterback, I think, is going to be something that's going to be really, really rough for them. We'll see how that works out. The defense has been great, as you said. They got their own version of the black shirts at Indiana, John.
Yep, some damn good football players in Indiana right now. All right, folks. So make sure that you can see what I'm holding up. It's not an option because you can still claim the book for free. Shipping is like $9 or something like that. So if you want that book, and it's not a pamphlet, that's 245 pages of great information about why options are a superior way to manage your money, to take the edge off, if you will, of the high risk of owning a $200 stock or a $500 stock. You could own a $5 option instead on that same stock. So check out itsnotanoption.com. Pete and I will be back Monday with more Rebels Edge, 1 p.m. Eastern Time.